LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the July 26th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 10 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, minus NBC News' Meet the Press, of course, preempted by Olympics coverage. But out of the remaining four, I will put together what should be an educational, informative, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. The two title topics I'll be covering are, the title of this week's video, of course, is Unvaccinated Insurrectionist Republicans Threaten U.S., and so that's really two topics, the problem of the unvaccinated and then the problem of the insurrection. I even have political comedy clips for each topic. And so, the two topics are the resurgence of the COVID epidemic in the United States, mainly because many Republicans and some others refuse to get vaccinated. And then also developments on the January 6th insurrection and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's refusal to accept two of the five Republicans House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy appointed, the two Jims, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks. And I'll be showing and criticizing the entire Fox News softball interview of Representative Jim Banks a little later. Clip 8, if you're following along in the clip summaries I put down in the video descriptions. But like I said, I'm starting with two political comedy clips on the two topics, starting with starting with the insurrectionist topic. Nancy Pelosi saying something, making kind of an amusing comment or response, I thought, talking about appointing more Republicans to the January 6th commission over in this clip.
Will you be appointing more Republicans to the committee like Congressman Adam Kinzinger?
That would be my plan.
So when will that be announced?
Perhaps after I speak to Adam Kinzinger. But I'm not about to announce it right this minute. But
I like that. Maybe after I talk to Adam Kinzinger first, though, I don't know, there may be some backstory to that clip because soon after ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos aired, Nancy Pelosi did announce to ABC News that she was appointing Representative Adam Kinzinger, who along with Representative Liz Cheney will be make it a bipartisan commission because they're both Republicans. And that's a brief excerpt of a clip I'll be showing you later, clip 7. If you're looking at the clip summaries down in the video description, that's something new I'm doing since I started doing my show on Mondays. Instead of having a clip list that you can look at with cryptic notes, I've actually described in English what's going on in each of the clips in summaries I put down in the video description to help people skip through the program for the topics that most interest them. But like I said before I showed that amusing response from Nancy Pelosi, I have a second political comedy clip on the second topic, the problem of the unvaccinated. And this is Donna Brazile in the pundit panel on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, maybe giving too much information about why she's going door to door to ask people to get vaccinated over in this clip.
It's key that non-political people speak up more, whether it's the medical profession, whether it's educators, whether it's just ordinary people. You know, George, when I received my vaccine, I went to a senior citizen public housing project in Washington, D.C. I told everyone I did not want to wait until I was 65, so I got in early. And I went door to door, similar to what I did when I was in politics, and I said, I'm getting the vaccine today. Will you join me? And they said, aren't you scared? I said, I'm scared to get the virus, especially back in the day when you got a virus when you had sex. I didn't want the virus. And so, you remember.
This is TMI.
I'm not admitting anything.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
I was able to go door to door and convince people that it was okay, it was safe. We have to lead by example. So
if you get the vaccine, you're so far less likely.
I don't know what that was all about. I think Donna Brazile had a couple jokes she tried to squeeze in there, and I don't know if either of them really landed at back when the virus, you got the virus from sex. Is that she's joking about the AIDS epidemic? There was no vaccine for that, so I don't even know how that relates. And then at the beginning she's saying we've got to get our vaccine advice from non-political figures. That's why Donna Brazile, a former high-level Democratic operative, went door to door telling people to get the vaccine. Well, Donna Brazile, not a non-political figure, but that wasn't actually the humorous part. It was the too much information about the fear of getting the virus from sex. I'm not sure why that was included there, but anyway, you can let me know what you think about the two political comedy clips. Now I'm going to get to the actual news clips, and that starts with the 4 news summaries. First, I'm going to show you CBS News, Face the Nation, and CNN State of the Union, both giving a summary focused mostly on the resurgence of COVID-19, the Delta variant, the so-called pandemic of the unvaccinated, and the longest and best news summary on that topic comes from CBS, of course, which I've sometimes said should be called the COVID broadcasting system, since of the big 5 corporate outlets, they were the first one to cover the emerging pandemic in China back in like January, February of 2020. And at the time, I didn't even take clips of it, and I talked about it in the when I was giving my commentary, saying that CBS was covering this virus in China, and they were either hyping the danger of this thing, or they were the only news network that was actually covering the biggest story of 2020. And guess what? It turned out to be number 2, as I've often said on my show. So I just want to point that out as a context for CBS News, Face the Nation. Actually, I'm showing you the very beginning of the show where they have John Dickerson giving a brief introduction, going to Mark Strassman back in his hometown of Atlanta, I guess, or he's based in Atlanta, talking about the COVID resurgence in the U.S. But if you go to the link in the video description to my sources, including, you can go to the CBS News Face the Nation link, which is their YouTube channel, where the entire program is split into segments, and you can look at Elizabeth Palmer's international reporting on COVID-19, which gives you the view of especially what's going on in South America right now is really bad. Indonesia's really bad. Of course, the Tokyo Olympics have been highly impacted. So I'm talking mainly about the COVID resurgence in the United States, which is totally unnecessary because we have more vaccine available than people willing to take the vaccine, which is so much different from a lot of the rest of the world, where there is a COVID resurgence for other reasons, and especially this Delta variant. But anyway, I think I've done enough talking before I get to these 2 news summaries. Here's John Dickerson and Mark Strassman giving the best news summary on the COVID-19 resurgence on CBS News' Face the Nation yesterday morning. Over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. The highly contagious Delta variant is driving the country into a 4th wave of the coronavirus pandemic. Infections continue to surge, and with less than half the country fully vaccinated, public officials are urgently trying to convince the hesitant so that the spike doesn't drag on into the fall. We begin this morning with Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
Unvaccinated America's playing COVID roulette with a mix of reluctance and defiance. And in places like New Orleans, the dominant Delta variant has pounced.
It's more aggressive, it's deadlier, and it is in our community.
Nationally, new COVID cases have spiked almost 50%, rises in all 50 states and 90% of U.S. jurisdictions.
If you can, please go out and get vaccinated.
Ominously, week-to-week COVID hospitalizations and deaths both jumped again.
We're past the tipping point. We're in trouble.
Trouble because of deserted vaccination clinics like this. Everyone has freedom of choice, even when it becomes your problem.
I've done all I know how to do.
Governor Kay Ivey's problem in Alabama. New cases here up 766% in the last month, in a red state with one of America's lowest vaccination rates.
Folks supposed to have common sense, but it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
Take Kentucky. Since March 1st, 95% of all COVID cases, 92% of all hospitalizations, and 89% of deaths were among unvaccinated or partially vaccinated people.
I'm more afraid than anything, I'll put it that way, than I would have been, I guess, if I had gotten the vaccine.
Vaccination rates in the next few weeks may define this fourth phase of the virus.
Like how I saw my parents struggling to breathe. It took me to watch my parents suffer.
And there's new vaccine pressure. The NFL warned this week that outbreaks among unvaccinated players could lead to forfeited games and paychecks. And more universities and employers have started to impose vaccine mandates.
Vaccines are how we end the pandemic, how we protect our communities, and how we retire our masks for good.
But for now, masking is back. Not everywhere, but increasingly recommended, even required. Across the South, school starts in a couple of weeks. And when it does, Atlanta's system will require students and teachers to wear masks. John?
So, yeah, like I said, the best news summary on that, and especially making the point about a minute from the end there, Mark Strassman talking about how our vaccination rates are really going to determine what's going to happen in the next few weeks and next few months. And when I get to my two clips at the end on the threat of the unvaccinated, and there are breakthrough infections with people who are vaccinated. And anyway, I'll talk about that more when I get to those last two clips. But the important thing to remember is what Mark Strassman said there about how the vaccine rates are really going to determine what happens in the next few weeks and next few months. You'll hear when I get to the Scott Gottlieb clip at the very end, clip 10, if you're looking at the summaries of the clips I put down in the video description, you'll see that there's a great variability in what the models say. In fact, when I play that clip, you'll see that the next few weeks will have between 90,000 cases a day, or there will be between 90,000 cases in the next few weeks and 800,000. I think I'm remembering those numbers correctly. Between 90,000 and 800,000, and there are other like the variance between what's going to happen in the best case and worst case scenarios is like 10 times as many deaths or 10 times as many cases. You'll see that when I get to the last two clips. So that, I think, was important context from Mark Strassman on CBS News' Face the Nation yesterday. It's much shorter on CNN State of the Union. I like the State of the Union. Jake Tapper's always talking about the State of the Union this week. What is it? He always starts the show. And this week it's sad and confused because this didn't have to happen. It's the threat of the unvaccinated, as I will talk about a little more after we watch Jake Tapper's news summary in the first 99 seconds of CNN State of the Union yesterday morning over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, D.C., where the state of our union is sad and confused as the U.S. suffers through yet another COVID surge, one that did not have to happen. The highly contagious Delta variant is fueling a rise in coronavirus cases in every state, with cases at their highest level since May, and one clear demographic group causing the spike: those who are not vaccinated. Only 49% of the United States is fully vaccinated. For those eligible for the vaccine, those 12 and older, it's only 57%. The most severe outbreaks, not surprisingly, are happening where vaccination rates are the lowest. Just 3 states, Florida, Texas, and Missouri, accounted for 40% of all the new cases this week. We've heard some heartbreaking stories of intensive care unit patients begging for the vaccine as they're about to go on a ventilator, only to be told by health professionals that it's too late. And for some healthcare workers, as well as vaccinated people who are digging out their masks again, patience with those who are not vaccinated is running thin. And now the White House, which just a few weeks ago seemed to be celebrating Independence Day from COVID, is debating whether to recommend masks for everyone indoors again, and facing pressure to back vaccine requirements or mandates in some circumstances. As new this week, the administration is actively exploring how to provide booster shots to vulnerable Americans whom they increasingly expect will benefit from another dose of the vaccine. Joining me to discuss all of this and more, the chief medical advisor to President Biden, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
And like I said, I will have a clip of Dr. Anthony Fauci. That's one of the two clips at the end on the COVID-19 resurgence in the U.S. that I will be showing Dr. Anthony Fauci and then Dr. Scott Gottlieb to talk about how there actually is going to be a fourth wave of COVID, apparently, especially if there isn't a giant uptick in vaccination rates pretty darn soon here in the United States. But the next two news summaries are on sort of a different topic. I guess I'll give it the Fox News bias version, because you're going to see Martha MacCallum and Mark Meredith, even on the supposedly straight news program Fox News Sunday, they definitely skew their reporting in a way to make Biden look as bad as possible. So the news summary from Fox News, it's Biden's agenda is stalling and bipartisanship is dying as like America burns in a crime wave and COVID resurgence, and everything's getting a lot worse because of Biden, and what he's trying to do looks like it's not going to happen as partisanship gets worse. And that's definitely not just the subtext. You'll see it's actually the text of the Fox News Sunday news summary that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News Sunday. Time is ticking on key parts of President Biden's first-year agenda concerning Democrats who say that the most promising window of action may be closing for them. Infrastructure, obviously one of the president's top priorities, is facing a crucial test of his ability to forge bipartisanship in Washington and hold his own party together to get a deal. Partisan polarization means little action on voting rights, on police reform, and on a budget resolution. The president is also facing backlash from fellow Democrats for his refusal to call for eliminating the filibuster to push his agenda through a divided Congress. In a moment, we'll speak with key senators on both sides of the aisle, Mark Warner of Virginia and Tim Scott of South Carolina. But first, let's turn to Mark Meredith, traveling with the president in Wilmington, Delaware. Hi, Mark. Good morning.
Martha, 6 months in, President Biden's top priority still appears to be ending the lingering pandemic, and the rest of his domestic agenda really rests with Congress, where bitter partisan divides could halt progress.
The bottom line is we're delivering on our promises.
President Biden insists he's getting things done, but on Capitol Hill, both parties are still squabbling on everything from nominees to infrastructure spending.
We continue to work hard, worked all day yesterday, all through the weekend. There are some thorny issues, but we can get it done.
Even Democrats are scrambling to keep their base on board with plans to pass two massive spending packages, especially as Republicans argue more spending could crash the economy.
It will take an inflation problem that we have today and pour jet fuel on it.
In major cities, crime is skyrocketing. Two recent high-profile shootings have D.C.'s police chief calling for change.
We have a vicious cycle of bad actors who do things, no accountability, and they end up back in community.
But in Congress, comprehensive criminal justice reform seems out of reach. Meantime, the Delta variant is causing a surge in new COVID cases and deaths. The White House is struggling to increase vaccination rates. And now some cities, including St. Louis, are reimposing mask mandates even for vaccinated residents.
Over the weekend, the president had a chance to make a campaign stop in Virginia. The Commonwealth is going to be holding a gubernatorial election this November, and that race may give both parties crucial insight into how voters feel heading into next year's midterm elections. Martha.
Mark Meredith, thank you very much, Mark, reporting from Delaware this morning. So joining us now is Senator Tim Scott, the top Republican negotiator on police.
Yeah, Senator Tim Scott, top Republican negotiator on police reform there. I didn't take a clip of him, though he said something really important about how they're not going to negotiate away qualified immunity for individual officers. I even saw a news article saying that they're trying to strengthen qualified immunity for individual officers. I've talked about qualified immunity in the past, and I don't want to go off on that tangent, but that sounds like it could kill the compromise bill on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That's really bad news. But did you notice that you saw the text and subtext of bias and spin that I talked about before I showed that clip. You notice also how they sort of like give a description of the Democrats' positions with some spin on it, and then they give they show clips of Republicans talking and giving their positions in their own words, like Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, and of course Senator Lindsey Graham was in there. They got to have their clips. Were there even any clips of Democrats in there? I'm not sure there were, but I will have a later clip from Fox News Sunday where I'm going to actually do something a little different. You know, I have most of these clips set so that every time I click on the clip, it starts from the beginning. But the softball interview that Martha MacCallum did with Jim Banks, who Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi rejected from the January 6th Select Committee to investigate the attack on the Capitol, there's this terrible softball interview, and I've set it so that I can pause the clip and stop and talk to you and then start it playing again from where I paused it. So I'm going to go through that whole 7-minute or 7.5-minute clip that's clip number 8 coming up. So we'll see how that works out. I don't know if it will work or not work, but hopefully it will be. It's an experiment. But I did want to juxtapose that biased Fox News Sunday summary that talked about Biden's stalled agenda and the dying bipartisanship and all that in a way that made Biden look as bad as possible. ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos had a new summary that kind of covered the same ground, but in a less biased way. They talked about how Biden still has support, but and it's all based on polling, that the ABC News summary is about polls showing Biden still has support, but Americans are pessimistic about these array of challenging issues. I think that's what I said in the summary of this clip that I put down in the video description. But I guess we'll see after we watch these 35 seconds together, the shortest of the news summaries together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, President Biden has hit the 6-month mark in office, holding majority support from the American people. Our brand new poll with Ipsos also shows that 52% of Americans believe that Biden is following through on his campaign promises. But it also shows that most Americans are pessimistic about the year ahead. A dramatic 20-point swing from optimism in May as the country faces an array of challenges: a resurgent coronavirus, rising crime, inflation. Our politics is divided as ever. We're going to address it all this morning, and we begin with the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
And that's actually the clip I'm about to show you, but I think you can see what I'm saying, that there is a way to cover Biden's stalled agenda, or, you know, the challenges. I mean, I wouldn't call the agenda stalled. There are a lot of things that need to be worked out before the August recess, including the infrastructure deal and the police reform bill, and this January 6th commission is actually going to have its first hearing tomorrow, and that's actually the first topic I'm going to cover with newsmaker clips. These next 2 clips are Nancy Pelosi and then Jim Banks. First, I want to show you Nancy Pelosi. This includes that first political comedy clip I showed you, where she talks about how she's not going to announce her appointment of adding Adam Kinzinger to the Select Committee until she has a chance to talk to Adam Kinzinger. But she talks more in general about appointing Republicans and the backlash that she's been getting, and some of the criticisms. And anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch this portion of George Stephanopoulos' interview of Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi yesterday morning on This Week with George Stephanopoulos together over here.
And I want to start with the January 6th Commission, the investigation that you have launched in the House. I know that this came about because the Republicans rejected a bipartisan independent commission, also rejected a Senate commission as well. But your decision to reject Congressman Jim Jordan and Jim Banks from the committee has drawn fire from Republicans. The Freedom Caucus is seeking to depose you as Speaker, and Liz Cheney is now the only Republican member of the committee. Are you concerned about the Freedom Caucus threat? And are you confident that the committee's work can be seen as credible if most Republicans won't participate?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. We have many challenges, and it's my honor to discuss them with you. First of all, no, I'm not concerned about any threat from the Freedom Caucus. We get those every day of the week. Our confidence that we have in the work of our bipartisan committee that we have now, select committee led by Chairman Benny Thompson, bipartisan with the participation of a very courageous member of Congress, Congresswoman Liz Cheney, is high. My confidence is high. I do believe that the work of this committee, in order to retain the confidence of the American people, must act in a way that has no partisanship, is all about patriotism. And I'm very proud of the members of the committee, and I'm certain that they will accomplish that goal. We have to, again, ignore the antics of those who do not want to find the truth. We will find the truth. That truth will have the confidence of the American people because it will be done patriotically and not in a partisan way.
Will you be appointing more Republicans to the committee like Congressman Adam Kinzinger?
That would be my plan.
So when will that be announced?
Perhaps after I speak to Adam Kinzinger. But I'm not about to announce it right this minute. But you could say that that is the direction that I would be going on. He and other Republicans have expressed an interest to serve on the select committee. And I wanted to appoint three of the members that Leader McCarthy suggested, but he withdrew their names. The two that I would not appoint are people who would jeopardize the integrity of the investigation. And there's no way I would tolerate their antics as we seek the truth.
Even relatively moderate Republicans like Senator Portman, who's my next guest, have said your decision will fuel even more division in the country. Are you worried at all by this precedent that Republicans will do the same thing when they are next in power?
No. Look, we have had an unprecedented action, an assault, an insurrection against our government, an assault on the Capitol building, which is an assault on the Congress on a day that the Constitution required us, by the Constitution, to validate the work of the Electoral College. So this was not just any day of the week. This was a constitutionally required day of action for Congress. So I can stay. The Republicans will say what they will say. Our select committee will seek the truth. It's our patriotic duty to do so, and we do not come into our work worried about what the other side, who has been afraid of this. Maybe the Republicans can't handle the truth. But we have a responsibility to seek it, to find it, and in a way that retains the confidence of the American people.
Maybe the Republicans can't handle the truth. I like that few good men, Jack Nicholson moment there at the end of that clip. And I think Nancy Pelosi comported herself well in describing why she kicked the two Jims off the committee, Jim Jordan, who is much more famous for being an ideologue, and then Jim Banks, who also has his departure from reality moments, and that's what I think is really the import of Nancy Pelosi's a few good men moment there, where maybe Republicans can't handle the truth, because, I mean, that's what it's about, where Republicans want there to be two sides between, like, facts and disinformation. That is not the kind of, like, two-sidedness that bipartisanship, it's supposed to be we agree on the facts and then we have different views of the facts. And anyway, to really elucidate what I'm talking about here, I'm going to try something a little different. I was telling you about earlier with this next clip. This is a 7.5-minute clip of Martha MacCallum, supposedly straight news anchor over on Fox News Sunday and for Chris Wallace this week. First, you'll see she gives this introduction saying, I mean, this in and of itself is biased. Plans for bipartisanship fell apart when Nancy Pelosi rejected Jim Jordan and Representative Jim Banks from the Select Committee to investigate January 6th, when, of course, before there was even a select committee, Democrats tried to negotiate with Republicans to have a bipartisan, 9/11 style investigation, where none of the people on the committee would be current politicians. They could be past politicians, and it would have completely equal power to subpoena for Democrats and Republicans. But Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, and Mitch McConnell rejected that, and Republicans voted against it. Not all of them, but almost all of them, especially in the House. I think Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger were like the only two. So the very beginning of this, where Martha MacCallum sort of said, plans fell apart after Nancy Pelosi did something wrong, that is bias in and of itself. But like I said, as sort of a new experiment, I'm going to play you this clip, but then kind of stop it along the way to intersperse my criticisms of Martha MacCallum's really bad softball interview, where she doesn't really bring up in any way why it is that Jim Banks was rejected from this committee by Nancy Pelosi, and lets Jim Banks get away with even more misinformation. But I'll talk about that a little more with you after we watch some of this 7.5 minute clip before I pause it. Here, let me put my earpiece in and start the clip that I will talk about with you a little more. Partway through it, I can hear myself talking in my ear. That's why I never keep this earpiece in while I'm talking. Echo, echo, echo. You can't hear it, but anyway, here's the clip that I'll talk about with you after we watch some of it over here.
Plans for a bipartisan committee to investigate the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol fell apart this week when House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected two of the Republicans who were named to that panel, prompting House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy to pull all of his GOP picks and threaten to launch his own investigation. Joining us now, Indiana Congressman Jim Banks, who was one of those. He would have been the top Republican on that panel. Congressman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Good to have you with us this morning.
Hey, Martha, thanks for having me.
So tell me, I know that you had conversations with Representative Benny Thompson about what was going to be the matters at hand, what would be discussed. What do you think blew up this commission last week? What was the motivation?
So now that first question is kind of a softball question, but I'll give her one softball question where, what do you think? What do you think? It's a very open-ended question. That one, I'm not going to call bias, but it is kind of a softball question, like that's sort of the definition of softball, like something really open-ended. What do you think? What do you think? And giving it to Jim Banks, and he uses that to drill in his one talking point you're going to hear over and over again in this clip, that it's really Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to have the real reason that the Congress was vulnerable on January 6th investigated, which is that she was the one responsible for security and she didn't, which is actually not even true. The Speaker of the House does appoint the Sergeant at Arms, but the President of the United States, Donald Trump at the time, appointed the architect, which has something to do with security. And of course, Mitch McConnell was the Senate Majority Leader. He had responsibilities. So all those talking points are false, which Martha MacCallum never calls him on, and never calls him on other things he said, which I will talk about a little more after we watch more of that clip over here.
Well, it's more clear than ever that Nancy Pelosi is not interested in an investigation. She's only interested in a narrative. She claimed that the reason that she booted me from the committee was because of antics on the part of Jim Jordan and I. In hindsight, what I realize what she means by that now is that we were prepared to ask questions that no one else has asked and demand answers as to why the Capitol was vulnerable to an attack on January 6th. Why was there a systemic breakdown of security at the Capitol on January 6th. If you're going to investigate January 6th, why not ask those questions? And that's all that this comes down to. She's already predetermined a narrative about Donald Trump, about Republicans. She doesn't want to talk about what happened at the Capitol that day to make sure that something like that never happens again.
So you don't think that she has concerns about those issues and how that security breakdown happened? Do you think that she feels it will reflect poorly on her?
I really do. And here's why. On Wednesday, before I found out that I was banned from the committee, I found out, by the way, on Twitter, I was meeting with the head of the U.S. Capitol Police Union, who represents the rank and file heroes that make up the Capitol Police, who protect me, my family, my staff, every single day. And here's what he told me. The head of the Capitol Police Union told me that on January 6th, the Capitol Police officers weren't prepared for what was going to happen, even though the head of the Capitol Police had intelligence reports dating back to 3 weeks before January 6th that something potentially very dangerous could happen that day. They weren't prepared for it. They weren't trained for it. And maybe most important of all, they weren't equipped for it. They lacked equipment, basic equipment to take care of something like what should have been expected would occur. And here's the bottom line. Once you go up to the top of the flagpole of who is in charge of the Capitol Police, who the Capitol Police Union chief, they blame the leadership of the Capitol Police. But due to the rules of the United States Capitol, the power structure of the Capitol, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, has more control and authority and responsibility over the leadership of the Capitol Police than anyone else in the United States Capitol. So she doesn't want us.
Remember, I told you what he just said is not true. Not true. Nancy Pelosi has more power over the security than anyone else. No, it's a shared responsibility between Nancy Pelosi, the President of the United States, who was Donald Trump at the time, and, of course, the Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, at the time. So, no, what he said wasn't true. Martha MacCallum won't call him on it, won't call him on other stuff, which I will talk about with you a little more after we continue watching the clip over here.
Ask these questions because at the end of the day, she is ultimately responsible for the breakdown of security at the Capitol that happened on January 6th.
So your colleague, and I think you used to have a pretty good relationship, Liz Cheney, came out swinging against you, calling the things that you had said about the commission disgraceful. Here she is.
I am absolutely confident that we will have a nonpartisan investigation, that it will look at the facts, that it will go wherever the facts may lead. There are 3 members that the minority leader proposed that the Speaker did not object to. She has objected to 2 members, and the rhetoric around this from the minority leader and from those 2 members has been disgraceful. This must be an investigation that is focused on facts, and the idea that any of this has become politicized is really unworthy of the office that we all hold and unworthy of our republic.
So she called some of the things that you said disgraceful with regard to this investigation. What do you say to Liz Cheney?
And you notice there, Martha MacCallum never really explained what are the things he said about this investigation that Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi found objectionable. Never quoted, never explained. Just, the things you said are objectionable, says Liz Cheney. What do you say? And you'll see when I keep playing the clip that he just goes back into, well, Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to be investigated for who was really in charge of security, which is kind of a bogus talking point I already explained. But down in the video description, I also put my sources, and one source I've listed for you there is the statement from Jim Banks after he was appointed to the commission. And here you can see he is saying not only that he wants to investigate why was the Capitol unprepared and vulnerable to attack on January 6th, but he also has this whole whataboutism thing where if Democrats were serious, they would be studying not only the January 6th riot at the Capitol, but also the hundreds of violent political riots last summer when many more innocent Americans and law enforcement officers were attacked. He's talking about the Black Lives Matter and, the protests that came after the murder of George Floyd last May. And then also the Good Friday murder of USCP Officer Billy Evans, perpetrated by a far-left extremist. And then he says, make no mistake, Nancy Pelosi created this commission solely to malign conservatives and to justify the left's authoritarian agenda. So he said a lot more than Martha MacCallum was willing to say. And it's not only that. If you, I put a link down in the video description to my May 2021 Sunday Clip Roundup titled Republican Mythology, where you see Representative Jim Banks actually question the fairness of Joe Biden's 2020 election victory. And if you click on that link, it's time indexed, so you can go right to that clip. And so you can see Jim Banks is like a 2020 stolen election conspiracy theorist, and he is also one of the people who wants to disrupt the January 6th Select Committee with this whataboutism in terms of protests by Black Lives Matter activists after the murder of George Floyd. And that's something that Martha MacCallum never mentioned in the softball interview that I will continue. I think that this is probably, I can probably finish the rest of it and talk about it with you a little more after we watch the end of that softball interview together over here.
Well, as I've already said, Speaker Pelosi didn't just ban me and Jim Jordan from serving on this committee. She also banned the very basic questions that we're asking. Why was the Capitol vulnerable on that day when 3 weeks before January 6th there were intelligence reports that the leadership of the Capitol Police were aware of? So whether it's Speaker Pelosi or Liz Cheney or anyone who sits on this committee, it's clear that those are questions that we should be demanding answers to. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want me on that committee, but she doesn't also doesn't want us to ask those questions because it leads to a series of answers that don't fit her narrative.
So I guess there are a lot of questions this morning about what this investigation is actually going to look like, because Minority Leader McCarthy said you guys are all out. Everybody is not going to participate. And yet we're hearing that Speaker Pelosi intends to go through with this on Tuesday. Here's what she said about the makeup of what this committee might look like just a short time ago. Watch this.
Will you be appointing more Republicans to the committee like Congressman Adam Kinzinger?
That would be my plan.
So when will that be announced?
Perhaps after I speak to Adam Kinzinger. But I'm not about to announce it right this minute.
She's pretty tight-lipped about that. What's your understanding of who...
Oh, I forgot that was the one other thing I wanted to comment on, so I'm glad I get to intersperse my comments here. Do you see Martha MacCallum showed my political comedy clip and then said, well, she's pretty tight-lipped about not wanting to announce it before she talks to the person she's going to appoint. What's that? Tight-lipped? I mean, that is just like basic courtesy not to announce appointing someone to a committee before you talk to the person you're going to appoint. That was pretty ridiculous. So sorry, that one less interspersed comment, and now we'll watch the rest of this ridiculously softball interview Martha MacCallum did with Representative Jim Banks over here.
Add to the committee, and are you planning to do your own investigation on the Republican side?
Well, again, it's clear that Pelosi only wants members on this committee who will stick to her talking points and stick to her narrative. That's why she's picked the group that she's already picked, and anyone that she asks to be on this committee from this point moving forward will be stuck to her narrative, to her point of view. There won't be another side. And that's, in the history of the Congress, something like this has never happened before. In the history of our country, you've never had the Speaker of the House deny the representatives that the minority party submitted for a select committee. It's never happened before. It's a break in precedent. And as everyone in America knows, you have a majority view, a minority view. That's the whole point of our committee structure in the Congress. So why does Nancy Pelosi not want to hear the other side? Why does she not want to answer the tough questions that Jim Jordan and I were prepared to ask and demand answers to? It's pretty clear why, because the further you go up that chain of command, the closer you get to Speaker Pelosi. We also know that the Senate, by the way, recently completed an investigation of their own. The Homeland Security and the Rules Committee jointly published a report that came out in June, and it talked about the systemic failure of leadership and a breakdown of security on January 6th. We know that a number of documents from the Speaker's office were submitted for that report, but there are also a number of documents that they refused to release, that the Speaker's office refused to release for that investigation, that still sit on the computers in the Speaker's office, that we should be demanding to take a look at as well. And the reason I can only speculate as to why they don't want those documents to be released, because it at the end of the day, it shows that the Speaker was involved in the lack of leadership and the breakdown of security that occurred on January 6th.
Congressman Banks, thank you very much. Good to have you with us today. We'll be watching that as it plays out this week. And coming up next, thank you.
So what do you all think of that new experimental format where I play a long clip but stop it periodically and intersperse my comments? Because I think I pretty much skewered everything that Representative Jim Banks said there. You saw how Martha MacCallum, all the way up to the end, let him get away with deflecting over to Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's supposed responsibility for lax security, where, I mean, she has some responsibility, but it's shared with several other power centers, as I was talking about before I showed the clip. Martha MacCallum never asking him about his previous comments, where and even vote. He joined the lawsuit against the fairness of Joe Biden's election that was bogus by all these attorney generals and Republican politicians, and that's, look at the link down in the video description to my May 2021 Republican Mythology Sunday Live clip roundup, where I have that clip where you can watch him question the fairness of Joe Biden's election. And then he attacked the committee, said he was going to be a proponent of whataboutism. Why aren't we talking about other, riots that happened in other places at other times? And anyway, I think before I showed the clip, while I showed the clip, and now after I showed the clip, I have definitely supported the premise of my argument, or I've supported my argument that Martha MacCallum gave an incredible softball interview to Representative Jim Banks, one of the two Jims rejected from the January 6th Insurrection Select Committee that Nancy Pelosi has put together, and I guess tomorrow they're having their first hearing. You can let me know what you think about all that down in the comment section. And now I want to move on to my last two clips on the secondary topic, or I guess the other title topic, not the threat from Republican insurrectionists, but the threat from Republican and other people who are unvaccinated. That is the totally avoidable COVID resurgence happening in the United States. I mean, there are COVID resurgences in other places that aren't unavoidable because other countries don't have the availability of the vaccine that we have here. And you can see Dr. Anthony Fauci, when he's talking to Jake Tapper, explains how this is a totally avoidable crisis that we seem to be going into. In this clip from CNN State of the Union yesterday, where Jake Tapper asks Anthony Fauci about a bad model for what's going to happen in the next few months in the United States in the COVID epidemic or pandemic, and about the problem of the unvaccinated, and whether maybe we prematurely declared victory against COVID in the United States in the penultimate newsmaker clip. The next clip will be Scott Gottlieb talking about the wide range of possible outcomes in the COVID pandemic in the United States in the next few weeks and few months. And then, of course, I'll have my bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip at the end for the Dash and Sandy or Dandy fans. Dash is my cat, Sandy is my dog. That's at the very end. But first, here's Anthony Fauci explaining the problem of unvaccinated people and what might happen in the United States coming up. Talking to Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union yesterday. Over here.
One model by the COVID-19 Scenario Modeling Hub projects that if the U.S. does not improve the vaccination rate, cases will continue to rise, and the U.S. could see a tripling of the current daily death toll, so up to 850 deaths a day by mid-October, though in the worst-case scenario in this modeling, that number could climb as high as 4,000 deaths a day, about as bad as it was last winter. Do you think it's really possible it could get that bad, 4,000 deaths a day?
Well, when they do modeling, Jake, they generally give you the worst-case scenario and the best-case scenario. But somewhere in the middle, if you look historically at the modeling that has been done over the last 18 months, for the most part, it's been pretty accurate. So I'm not so sure it would be the worst-case scenario, but it's not going to be good. We're going in the wrong direction. If you look at the inflection of the curve of new cases, and as you said in the run-in to this interview, that it is among the unvaccinated. And since we have 50% of the country is not fully vaccinated, that's a problem, particularly when you have a variant like Delta, which has this extraordinary characteristic of being able to spread very efficiently and very easily from person to person. And we know we have many, many, many vulnerable people in this country who are unvaccinated. And that's the reason why, as I've said so many times, we have the tools to blunt that and make that model wrong. But if we don't vaccinate people, the model is going to predict that we're going to be in trouble as we continue to get more and more cases.
And almost entirely the victims will be unvaccinated Americans?
Well, yes, Jake, that's the issue, and that's the thing that sometimes gets confusing to people. If you are vaccinated, the vaccine is highly protective against the Delta variant, particularly against severe disease leading to hospitalization and sometimes ultimately to death. So it really is, as Dr. Walensky has said many times, and I've said, it's really an outbreak among the unvaccinated. So this is an issue predominantly among the unvaccinated, which is the reason why we're out there practically pleading with the unvaccinated people to go out and get vaccinated. And that's the reason why it's very heartening and positive to hear people like Governor Asa Hutchinson and others to go out there in their own state and say, hey, let's get vaccinated, because that's really the solution to this.
About a month ago, we saw President Biden and a number of governors across the country, Democrats and Republicans, saying that the virus was in retreat. In retrospect, that sure seems premature.
Well, it certainly is in retreat among the vaccinated, Jake, and it gets back to what we've been saying. It's kind of like we have two kinds of America. We have the very vulnerable unvaccinated part, and we have the really relatively protected vaccinated part. So if you are vaccinated, you are really in a very different category than someone who's not vaccinated.
A new poll shows that 80% of unvaccinated Americans say that they probably will not get the shots or definitely will not get the shots. 80%. A lot of people are getting frustrated with those vaccine holdouts because the current state of this pandemic is completely preventable. Here is Republican Alabama Governor Kay Ivey. Take a listen.
These folks are choosing a horrible lifestyle of self-inflicted pain. Folks supposed to have common sense. But it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
The unvaccinated folks are letting us down, the governor says. Former White House advisor Andy Slavitt says he thinks President Biden needs to get, quote, very aggressive in turning the heat up on unvaccinated people. Do you agree, and do you share Governor Ivey's anger?
Well, I'm very frustrated. I generally don't like to get involved in blaming people, because I think that would maybe push them back even more, rather than, I mean, I could totally understand the governor's frustration, so I don't have any problem with that. She has every right to be frustrated. But what I would really like to see is more and more of the leaders in those areas that are not vaccinating to get out and speak out and encourage people to get vaccinated. I was very heartened to hear people like Steve Scalise come out and say, hey, we need to get vaccinated. Even Governor DeSantis right now in Florida is saying the same thing. We've got to get more people who relate well to the individuals who are not getting vaccinated to get out there and encourage them to get vaccinated, as well as the trusted messengers in the community. We've just got to do better, Jake, because we have the tools to do this. This is an unnecessary predicament we're putting ourselves in.
And that is actually one of the things that might turn around this threat from unvaccinated Republicans, is that Republicans are more and more coming out in favor of vaccines. There was this day on Fox News where Sean Hannity and Steve Doocy came out in favor of vaccinations. Because I don't know why, because they were killing their own viewers. Of course, Tucker Carlson is still anti-vaccine, and I like Governor Ivey there of Alabama, like, the unvaccinated are letting us down. That's one of my. They played that clip you saw earlier in one of the news summaries I showed, or was that? I think that might have been in. Well, whatever. I really like the Governor Ivey clip, and it shows that maybe there is hope on the horizon, which I will talk about a little more after I show this Scott Gottlieb clip, because I actually have a tweet from Scott Gottlieb which shows a little like good news on the horizon. But I mean, really, the good news is that with the Delta variant creating this resurgence, what is it that's really going to convince Republicans and the unvaccinated, people who say they're not going to get vaccinated? What's going to convince them to get vaccinated? Well, it's kind of what West Virginia Governor Jim Justice was talking about a couple weeks ago on my Monday Media Mix-Up, in that interview he did with Martha MacCallum on... no, not Martha MacCallum, Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where he talked about how it's not like a lottery just to give people away, give stuff to people to get vaccinated, give away stuff. But there's also a death lottery getting on. And what's going to convince people? It's when a lot of people around them start dying or getting really sick, that when unvaccinated people see all the unvaccinated people around them getting COVID, and some of them getting really sick and some of them even dying, that's what's going to boost vaccination rates. And I'm going to show you a tweet from Scott Gottlieb after this next clip that supports my argument that might happen. But first, here is Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner under Donald Trump, who has been... several weeks back I showed a Sunday Live clip roundup questioning or asking the question whether there would be a COVID fourth wave. And Scott Gottlieb said yes. And then Michael Osterholm, this other epidemiologist or scientist, I can't remember what his title is, but he was saying, no, it's just going to be regional outbreaks. And at first it seemed like Michael Osterholm was... No, wait, maybe I have it backwards, but I'll have to go back and look. But there was actually some question, is there going to be a fourth wave of COVID in the United States, or is it just going to be regional outbreaks? And it's still kind of a question, depending on how scared people get, whether the unvaccinated Republicans and other unvaccinated people will actually get vaccinated. And anyway, there's some evidence that they are getting vaccinated, but I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the last Newsmaker clip from Dr. Scott Gottlieb, FDA commissioner under Donald Trump and frequent CBS News Face the Nation pundit over here.
So let's start. People are hearing about increasing cases, maybe wearing masks, even if you're vaccinated. There's also talk of breakthroughs if you're vaccinated. You always want to start with the risk decisions that people have to make for themselves. So how should Americans think about what's happening right now and how they should make their own risk judgments based on what you know?
Well, look, the first thing I would urge Americans to do is to get vaccinated. We know the vaccines are highly effective even against this Delta variant. There was data in the New England Journal of Medicine out this week showing that the vaccines are 88% effective against symptomatic disease. And certainly anyone who goes out and get vaccinated right now is going to have a vaccine that protects them through the fall and the winter. So they're going to have broad, durable protection from that vaccine. Whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, if you want to add an additional measure of protection, if you're in a high prevalence environment where there's a lot of infection, a mask can still be helpful against this new variant. The physical characteristics of this virus has not changed. The reason it's more transmissible is that there's simply more of it. When people get infected, they get more virus, higher viral levels, and they exude more virus, so they're more contagious. But the characteristics of the virus haven't changed as far as we know, so it's not more airborne, it's not more likely to be permeable through a mask. So a mask can still be helpful. I think, though, if you're going to consider wearing a mask, the quality of the mask does matter. So if you can get your hands on a KN95 mask or an N95 mask, that's going to afford you a lot more protection. Initially, at the outset of this epidemic, we were encouraging people not to use N95 masks because there weren't enough of those masks for medical workers. Now there's plenty of masks. There's plenty of N95 masks in the system. The Biden administration has done a good job ramping up supply. There's also KN95 masks available. So I would encourage people to look at the quality of the mask and try to get their hands on a better quality of mask. The final piece of advice I would give, and the question I get a lot is, if you are vaccinated, can you still spread the virus? We had pretty good data with the old strains of the coronavirus that if you were vaccinated, you were far less likely to transmit the virus. That's probably still true. You're probably less likely to transmit the virus. But if you are vaccinated and you do develop an asymptomatic or a mildly symptomatic infection, there probably is a higher chance that you can transmit this Delta virus than some of the old strains because there's just more of this virus. The viral levels are higher earlier in the course of the infection. So if you're around vulnerable people, if you're taking care of a newborn or an elderly patient and you're vaccinated and you don't feel well, you should probably get yourself checked out and not assume that you're impervious to any kind of infection, even if you're vaccinated.
So when you use the word probably, it seems like the moment we're in, do we have a handle on this Delta variant in terms of how much there is? And some of the questions you just raised is a little bit more fuzzy than we might hope.
Yeah, look, what we know is that the virus levels that you develop early in the course of the infection are significantly higher with this Delta virus than with the old strains. And that's why people are more contagious. That's why this is spreading more rapidly. But the other thing we know about this is that those virus levels go up very quickly. And that's why we think that the virus it's easier for this virus to overwhelm the immune system. So, for example, if you have a vaccine that you got 7 or 8 months ago and your antibody levels are declining, if you get this new Delta variant, it's easier for this Delta variant to overwhelm low antibody levels. And that's why we're considering whether or not some people might need boosters to increase their antibody levels. So we know that you have more virus on board earlier in the course of the infection. We know that you're likely to shed more virus. That makes you more contagious. It also makes it more likely that you're going to develop an infection from this new variant.
There was a study done by the COVID-19 Research Consortium that said basically we may be in this period we're in now all the way through into mid-October. The CDC then came out with numbers and said over the next 3 weeks, there may be between 90,000 and 800,000 new cases. That seems like a very big range, between 90 and 800,000. What's your sense of how long we're going to be in this period we're in?
Yeah, people are having a hard time modeling this outbreak, and the CDC relies on outside modelers to do their own estimates, and they put out the models that they got from that consensus group. But you're right, if you look at heading into the week of August 14th, the models that the CDC put out estimated that there's going to be anywhere from 10,000 infections a day over the course of that week to 100,000 infections a day, which really is an indication that they don't have a good sense where we're heading with this outbreak. I believe that there's more virus than we're picking up right now. There's probably a lot of people with mild or subclinical infections, since more of the infection is happening in a younger population that's less likely to become very symptomatic. We're not doing a lot of testing. More of the testing that we are doing is antigen tests that are being done at home and not getting reported. So I think we're much further into this epidemic than we're picking up, and hopefully further through this epidemic. If you look at the UK right now, and we're probably about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks behind the UK, perhaps a little less than that. If you look at the UK, they do in the last 7 days appear to be turning a corner. You're starting to see a downward trajectory on the cases. Now, it's unclear whether that's going to be sustained. They just lifted a lot of the mitigation that they had in place. But if the UK is any guide, we are perhaps further into this epidemic and hopefully going to turn a corner in the next 2 or maybe 3 weeks.
So there you see Scott Gottlieb, frequent commentator on CBS News' Face the Nation and former FDA commissioner under the Trump administration, talking about how maybe, or talking about the great, the wide gap in the predictions as to what's going to happen in the COVID epidemic in the United States with this Delta variant, talking about the wide range in the models of how high the numbers might go. Well, it was like 90,000 to 800,000. That is like a huge difference. And it all has to do with whether people are going to get vaccinated. And I want to end the show on a more positive note, showing something Scott Gottlieb tweeted. Here's a tweet from Scott Gottlieb last night saying, "The Delta strain is driving renewed interest and efforts to secure vaccination. Sunday, 779,000 doses delivered over yesterday's total, including 489,000 newly vaccinated Americans. The 7-day average of newly vaccinated Americans is up 28% over the prior week." So maybe that is good news. Maybe that means we will have, the unvaccinated Republicans will start getting vaccinated as they see people around them who are unvaccinated getting sick and dying. That's kind of a sad way to motivate people to get vaccinated, but that's kind of where we are, where the United States is under threat from unvaccinated insurrectionist Republicans, which of course is the title topic I'm talking about today. I also saw, wait, let me see if I can import this live comment here. There's a comment from Benta Hest, who actually gave me a significant contribution to support my live streams this month, saying, well, Republicans would support their surgeons wearing masks during their surgeries, so why don't they support mask mandates? And I appreciate that comment from Benta Hest, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. What is it? Yeah, B-E-N-T-E, Benta Hest. Benta Hest. I want to get the name right there. I want to make sure am I pronouncing that correctly, but thank you for that comment, Benta Hest. And I wanted to also talk about something Scott Gottlieb tweeted last night after that last clip. Over here, this is Scott Gottlieb pointing out that maybe because of the spikes in the coronavirus pandemic in the United States after the Delta variant has made the pandemic even more transmissible. It looked like it scared some people into getting vaccinated. So that is the final good news clip or news, I guess, still image I wanted to share with you. And I'm now ready to end my Monday Media Mix-Up show, but I did promise a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the Dash and Sandy or Dandy fans out there. Dash is my cat, Sandy is my dog, and early this morning when I was watching MSNBC's Morning Joe, I did do a brief video clip for Dash and Sandy. This is Dash and Sandy interacting as first around their mutual water bowl they share, and then Sandy the dog goes outside, comes back inside, and they interact both times. This is like 4 a.m. this morning while I was like waking up and what, because MSNBC's Morning Joe, where I am in California, airs between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. I think this clip is from like 4 a.m. this morning, and I'll talk to you just briefly a little more after we watch that clip from this morning over here. So there you see what's going on in the middle of the night in my house while I'm watching Morning Joe on MSNBC. I'm dealing with the needs of Dash the cat and Sandy the dog and their interactions. Anyway, that's the final clip to finish the show. I hope you appreciate all the time and effort I put into creating my Monday Media Mix-Up, which if you include my Sunday live clip roundup, something I've been doing for over 8 years. And anyway, I'll be back next Monday and every Monday at least throughout the summer. And until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.